Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports, and in today's video we're going to focus on the Milwaukee Bucks with a trade guide focused on this team, what they could potentially look to do at that NBA trade deadline that is coming up very soon. And just a reminder, the week of the NBA trade deadline, I'm going to be live pretty much the entire week on the channel on the dates February 6th through February 9th during the day. This channel will be live with NBA trade content as well as more videos coming out on those days as well, covering the NBA trade deadline and potential moves. We've already seen one trade with Rui Hachimura going from Washington to the Los Angeles Lakers, where in my Wizards trade guide I said it's a 99% guarantee that the Wizards trade Rui Hachimura. And now we're going to continue here with the Milwaukee Bucks and hopefully cover some of the things we expect them to do as well. So let's look at the video preview here. First of all, we're going to look at the current record of the team and the draft assets that they have to trade, as well as long-term cap space. Those three components are very, very important when it comes to looking at potential trades. The current record, of course, indicates whether they're going to likely be a buyer, seller, if this team's a contender or not. Of course, for Milwaukee, we all know that they are. As long as you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, you at least have a puncher's chance in the postseason, and you have to like their odds decently well in that East, even though it's a much better East than normal. Milwaukee's still one of those top teams, and they're a dangerous team. So we'll talk about their record. We'll look at the draft assets that they have to trade, the long-term cap space that they could, potentially look to make moves for. Just a little disclaimer, they don't really have any money. So that segment's going to be very short in this video. Then the most important part, the tradable players and their contract situations. Everyone likes to, mock up fake trades, but everyone forgets the money matters when it comes to NBA trades. Unless you have cap space, which 29 teams right now basically do not, you need to have ways to match money in deals, and that's where things get a little tricky for Milwaukee. So we'll spend a little bit of extra time there in that segment. Then we'll focus on some potential trade targets. I've got kind of two different avenues here for Milwaukee to explore, and then also their projected activity level. Do I think Milwaukee's going to be an active buyer, an active seller? And what are they going to look to do? So it's going to be a really good video. Hopefully you guys do enjoy. A lot of work goes into these trade guides. Planning out exactly, looking around the league, canvassing potential moves for this team. So I do hope you guys really enjoy. If you do, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. Current record for Milwaukee, they are 30-17 at the time I'm recording this. That is 13 games above 500. Very, very sizable record and very impressive record for a team that's played pretty much every single game without Chris Middleton. He's only played in 8 games this year. His minutes are down, of course, coming off of that wrist surgery. And they're still winning. I think that's a testament to Giannis. That's a testament to Coach Budenholzer, who I know he receives a lot of flack at times, but everywhere he goes, they seem to win a lot of regular season games at the very least. He is an NBA champion as well, so he's got that under his belt. This Bucks team is good. I work very closely with this team, actually. I have a very good understanding of who's here. Of course, Javon Carter's kind of fallen out of the rotation a little bit as of late, which is kind of surprising to me. I think Javon Carter gives them some really nice stuff. But this team's good. They're third in the Eastern Conference, half game back of second. But very important to note, they're only 1.5 games ahead of 5th place, which is the Cleveland Cavaliers, who recently beat them last week. That race to be a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference is going to be a big time challenge. And the one thing I'm going to say, you really don't want to finish 4th or 5th this year in the East. When you look at seeds 1 through 3, very likely you get a very favorable matchup across seeds 6 through 8. Whoever ends up making it through the play-in tournament, you'd have to feel pretty good about your odds to win one of those series. 4 or 5, this is where you get some of those tricky matchups. It could be potentially Philly playing Brooklyn. It could be Milwaukee playing Brooklyn with a healthy Kevin Durant. No one wants to do that, especially with how Brooklyn's looked this year under Jacques Vaughn. It could be Cleveland versus Brooklyn. It could be Cleveland versus Milwaukee. Could perhaps be Cleveland versus Philly. Right now, it's very bunched up, like I said, between 2 and 5. There's 2 games separating the 2nd seed and the 5th seed. So every head-to-head matchup down the stretch here matters. The Cavs and Bucks have already played their entire season series, so that's out of the way. They split it at home. Both teams won their home games and lost their road games in that series. So it'll be impressive it'll be important, to see how everything finishes up here in the East, because being a 4 or 5 seed is not favorable this season in the East. Then we get into the draft assets, and there is only one tradable first round pick that Milwaukee possesses, and that pick comes in 2029. Of course, part of the reason why they made a big-time trade for Drew Holiday. They own it. They owe a ton of picks and pick swaps out to New Orleans. Of course, last year they did have their own pick. They drafted MarJon Beauchamp. They could have traded that on draft night, but I think they feel pretty good about sticking there. Beauchamp's a player who I think is going to end up lasting in Milwaukee for quite some time. So I think they've done a pretty good job when they've had draft assets. You look back a few years ago, they got Jordan Nwora in the second round as well. I believe maybe even the last pick of the draft. They also traded back in to draft Hugo Bassan as a draft and stash player. He's actually playing for the Metropolitans 92 with Victor Wembanyama this year. The Bucks have some nice young talent, whether that's waiting in the wings like Hugo Bassan, who I really like, or just on the roster in general with Jordan Nwora, who kind of fills a spot-up shooter role. And then MarJon Beauchamp is, I think, going to be a nice off-ball cutter and slasher with the ball in his hands, type of player who can maybe, make the extra pass when he needs to. So right now, they don't really have the draft assets to trade, but they do have some nice young guys already on the roster who I think are very important for them to continue to roll with moving forward. So when it comes to long-term cap space, it's just not really a reasonable expectation to see Milwaukee operate that way. They already owe around $160 million across 9 players for next season. So Milwaukee, none of the moves they make this year will be cap space decided. Now, they might want to avoid the luxury tax. That's a completely different discussion. But with how much they already owe, it's going to be very tough to do that if they want to improve this roster. So Milwaukee's kind of caught in a weird spot here where you probably want to add a player or maybe two to take your next step to being, maybe the championship favorite in the Eastern Conference. But at the same time, you don't want to just run up your tax bill as well. So they have some decisions to make. Cap space, though, is not going to come into their decision-making process. It's just not a realistic outcome. Now we get into tradable players, and this is where we get to have a little bit of fun. I've got 5 different names on this list. Some of them are way more likely than others. So let's jump into it. Serge Ibaka, 1 year, $1.84 million veteran minimum contract. He has not been playing for the Milwaukee Bucks, and the two sides are looking for a pathway to get him to another franchise that will maybe give him some actual consistent minutes. Of course, they traded for Serge Ibaka last year at the NBA trade deadline, and what was, I think, kind of a surprise move. I know Dante DiVincenzo was struggling last year, kind of never reacclimated back into Milwaukee after the injury he sustained in their postseason run to the NBA Finals when they won it. But I do think that it was kind of shocking to see him get traded for Serge. I just was not expecting that last year. That actually opened up a massive trade exception for the Los Angeles Clippers as well, which is a very strange decision in my opinion from Milwaukee. But you have to understand, last year at the time they traded for Serge, Brook Lopez had not even played a game yet due to his back injury. So Ibaka might have been a little bit more, insurance policy type of piece for them, where they were worried about what their center minutes were going to look like. Now, it doesn't justify it. Brook Lopez ended up coming back. He's been fine. He's actually been great this season for them. One of the best shot blocking big men in the NBA. I believe he ranks 2nd per game in that category. And then he also is someone who can step out behind the three-point line. You think about some of his marquee performances this year. One of those matchups against Cleveland, I believe he knocked down 6 or 7 threes. He had a game against New Orleans where he lit up the Pelicans. Teams that play drop coverage have really had an issue defending Milwaukee in the past. And Brook Lopez is the reason why he's an absolutely untradeable player. He's at the heart of everything they do. Jordan Nwora, 2-year, $6.2 million deal. I included him on this list because he's a really nice package piece. If you're trying to, maybe trade a player in that, $4 to $5 million range, or say Serge Ibaka, that $2 million range, throwing in a little bit more salary really helps you match money up to 125%. So if there's a player, say around $7 million that you want, Ibaka and Nwora actually make the money work to get that done. So it is important to note that Nwora is a potential move piece just because of his contract to make money work. But at the same time, he is a solid player. I don't think he'll be a big part of their playoff rotation. I'd be kind of shocked about it. AJ Green's also stepped up this year and has given them some nice perimeter shooting, which I think makes Jordan Nwora a little bit more expendable. But at the end of the day, it's not like they want to give up Nwora for nothing, right? They'll look at him as kind of a young prospect who has a future in the league. And They're not just going to throw him in to throw him in. They're going to look at that as a value piece, as they should. George Hill, 1 year, $4.4 million deal. I'm out on George Hill at this point of his career. He's a nice linchpin glue guy. He doesn't screw a lot of stuff up, doesn't turn the ball over a ton. But the one thing I'm going to say, come playoff time, he doesn't give you any half-court offense other than just, oh, he's going to catch and shoot, or he's going to catch and drive to the rim on a brutal closeout if a guy jumps at him. That's really it. He's kind of a connector piece at this point. He'll make the extra pass. He's smart. He knows what he's supposed to do, but physically, he's just limited at this point of his career. George Hill's been a phenomenal NBA player during his career. Just at this point, though, $4 million is kind of a hefty price tag. So if you were to attach Jordan Nwora with George Hill, that gets you kind of in the realm of being able to trade for guys on around $9 million a year deals. Maybe a guy like Jay Crowder, who we'll talk about later. Joe Ingles, 1 year, $6.5 million. They used their taxpayer mid-level exception on him this past year, and he's been a pretty nice bright spot for them since coming back. He gives you another one of those connector type forwards where he's able to handle the ball a bit, push and transition with it. He's pretty crafty around the rim as well. Had a really nice ball fake layup a few games ago for Milwaukee. And I think one thing about Ingles too, he can shoot the three ball. So you look at him as kind of one of those important role players. I don't see any way that they would move him realistically. Now, if something really important came up for them where they could maybe package the top 4 players on this list in Serge, Nwora, Hill, and Ingles for a sizable upgrade around, $18 to $20 million, I think that's the point where they'd consider it and look at that as a big time addition for their team. But I would just be kind of surprised if something like that ever materialized. I think Joe Ingles is pretty safe at this point. And then Chris Middleton. This is kind of the sleeper dark horse. Oh my gosh, could this guy get traded at the deadline player? And it seems kind of crazy, right? Because Milwaukee, the whole story is, hey, last year they probably could have beat Boston, especially if Chris Middleton was playing. They almost beat them without him. And Middleton always plays his best basketball against Boston anyway. So would Middleton's presence have helped them win that series? Probably. But the issue is Middleton hasn't been present this year either. Again, they played 47 games. They're 30-17. And Chris Middleton has only played in 8 of those games. And look at his contract here. He's making $38 million this year, $40 million next season, and it's a player option. It's very possible Chris Middleton could prioritize going into free agency where there's a little bit more money out in the market this summer and trying to get a long-term deal. And you might say, whoa, why would he pass up $40 million? It's because he would likely sign something around 4 years, $100 million in free agency. And perhaps his camp, his agency would say, look, if you opt in and if you don't get healthy, you don't play well again, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt anymore. Teams are going to be worried about that long-term, and you're likely going to lose long-term money at the cost of short-term money. So there's some questions here for Chris Middleton on whether he's going to opt in or not. I think most people are assuming he will. Again, I won't be shocked if he does. It is a very high number at $40 million, but I wouldn't be completely shocked if he doesn't either. And because of that, Milwaukee does inherit a little bit of risk here, keeping him. So let's look at Chris Middleton. He's played in 8 games this year. He's averaging only 11 points per game, which is a noticeable drop-off from the 20-plus points he averaged last season. 33% from the field and 28% from 3. One thing about Chris Middleton, when he's injured, he does not play basketball. His rehab is completely focused on his body and his physical fitness, and because of that, he often comes back rusty. During COVID, before the bubble, he admitted to not having touched a basketball in months. And the same thing is true again here. You can tell a player as skilled as him as a shot maker, shot creator, should not be shooting this poorly from the field. I know a wrist surgery definitely does throw some things off, but you can tell his feel for the game is a little out of whack right now and that he's rusty. He has a huge contract number, but he also has great historical production. If Milwaukee were to try and move him, the teams that I think would be heavily interested would include the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers. Both teams do have tradable first-round picks. Both teams have solid options to get to the money. The Lakers would be an expiring contract with Russell Westbrook. I'm sure Milwaukee would probably try and flip that into something else. And for Dallas, they have a collection of role players that I think would really help Milwaukee, to be honest. I think Tim Hardaway Jr. would be a really nice fit onto this team. There's a bevy of guys that Dallas has that are, maybe good enough to be your fourth, fifth, or sixth best players on a championship team. The issue with Dallas is they don't really have a number 2 guy, which is why they would maybe look at Chris Middleton that way. But it's kind of tough to see Milwaukee moving him still. So I'm a little apropos about this. I don't think that Milwaukee ultimately trades Middleton. It would be pretty surprising to see that. But again, I think he's the sleeper dark horse. Okay, could this actually happen? And I don't think it's, 100% no way Milwaukee moves him. I think it's probably like 95% Milwaukee doesn't move him, which is why I thought it was worth addressing in this video. So let's look at those potential trade targets now for Milwaukee. At the forward spot, I think this is the one thing they're really hunting for on this team still. I feel like they feel pretty good about their backcourt. I didn't consider them trading Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton. I think that they like the three-point shooting that those two guys give them. I think what they're really looking for is another big forward to kind of pair with Bobby Portis in the second unit, somebody who has a lot of playoff experience, has been successful in the postseason before, and can be physical, kind of like what PJ Tucker gave them years ago after they traded for him from the Houston Rockets. And I think these two guys are the perfect players that kind of fit that bill, right? Jay Crowder, Marcus Morris. Now, for Marcus Morris, it's clear that he's taken a step back in the last couple of years. He's not the same player he was when the Clippers first traded for him coming out of New York. He's slowing down a little bit. His first step is not nearly as bursty. And defensively, he struggles with quicker players a little bit, which you would think for Milwaukee could be a problem because Giannis, Brook Lopez are already kind of more drop back and protect the rim type defenders. I know a lot of people give a lot of love to Giannis for his defense. Giannis is not a primary on-ball defender. He's a great team defender based on what he does when he's guarding other players who do not have the ball. He makes up a ton of ground, and his length definitely bothers both the passing lanes and shots around the rim when he's rotating over as a weak side guy. So Marcus Morris not being the best on-ball defender maybe is a concern for them, especially against quicker players, but they do have Drew Holiday, who you would think at the end of games is going to be on the best ball handler, best shot creator for the team. So maybe there's a world that Mook does make some sense for Milwaukee. And then Jay Crowder, he's one of the big dark horses as well, simply because we haven't seen him play this year. Do some executives and GMs believe? We don't really know if Jay Crowder can give us good quality minutes down the stretch. He might be out of NBA shape. Remember, he hasn't played an NBA game since last May. So we haven't seen Jay Crowder in a long time, nearly 8 months at this point. So there are some questions about that. Jay Crowder's always been somewhat of a streaky three-point shooter. There's games where he is on fire and he's, shooting 5 of 7. And then there's games where teams leave him open and they feel pretty comfortable giving him those shots and he shoots maybe 1 of 5 or 2 of 6 from the three-point line on open attempts. And you feel, why are we doing this? Why do we have him on the court? Now, I think his physicality is still something that they could use. I think he is a little bit quicker on his feet than Marcus Morris at this point. And he's been in a lot of big-time NBA games. He's been in multiple NBA finals. He's been in multiple Eastern Conference finals, Eastern Conference playoffs. He's been in Western Conference playoffs. He's been around the league. He knows what it's about. He's a pro's pro. I really do believe that. I think the situation in Phoenix is more indicative of who the Suns are than who Jay Crowder is. Everywhere Jay Crowder's gone for the most part, he's, brought his lunch pail and his boots and he's went to work. Phoenix, I think, has kind of fumbled the bag with this a little bit. We've seen them fall in the standings because of not having Jay Crowder, especially with Cam Johnson injured. This is not a Jay Crowder issue, in my opinion. It's a Suns issue. So I think Jay Crowder could really help Milwaukee. I know that Milwaukee has been in contact with Phoenix about potential Jay Crowder trades. Milwaukee really wants Jay Crowder. And I think if they're going to land somebody, Jay Crowder is likely the player. The projected activity level, there's going to be one addition. Milwaukee's going to make one move, and it's going to be a desired addition of Jay Crowder. I really believe that Jay Crowder's the player that they add into their roster. I would be pretty surprised if it's not him. To be honest, at this point, I think Marcus Morris does make some sense, but the money for Jay Crowder is a little bit easier to work out. And I think he kind of fits the needs a little bit smoother as well than Marcus Morris. Morris is a little bit more of a ball stopper. Jay Crowder swings that ball around when he's not, in a spot to just catch and shoot or catch and straight line drive. So I think he's going to be a nice addition for Milwaukee. Ultimately, I'd be surprised if Jay Crowder goes anywhere other than Milwaukee at this point. The two teams have had a lot of discussions, and I think ultimately by February 9th or earlier, Jay Crowder will be a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe to the channel for more as well. There's a lot of fun covering the Milwaukee Bucks in this trade guide. Remember, we're covering pretty much every single team in the NBA, so go check out some of the past videos as well, and we'll have future ones coming up between now and the NBA trade deadline. Thanks again so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.